Hi and welcome. My name's Marie and I'm the founder of UNFUNK Your Soul. UNFUNK Your Soul is a collective, a movement, a brand that unites, founded out of my desire to honor my journey and introduce you to mind-body practices to unfunk yourself. In this next episode, I'll be talking about trust, how we can learn to trust ourselves a little bit more, how we can learn to trust others, and how we explore that relationship so we can lead lives that are perhaps a little more fulfilling, a little more soul nourishing. Now, I know that trust is, trust is something that I find difficult, and that's trusting other people. And I think that's a long-standing judgment, a long-standing thing, shall we say, that I've had from a young age. And it's something like through my teenage years and 20s that my trust in other people has been tested. And sometimes I felt that there's been a lack of trust, or that trust has been broken in somehow, or that I've just not trusted people because their actions have been untrustworthy. So I think that's kind of manifested itself in my adult relationships where I tend to perhaps only have a few closer friendships, relationships. And I think obviously relationships are give and take and that kind of meeting of minds, meeting of beliefs, values, obviously all those different kinds of recipes that you will have that make and constitute a relationship. And trust is fundamental to that relationship. Say there's different pillars. And obviously, if one pillar is a bit shaky or is absent, then the whole balance of that relationship that is resting on these pillars becomes unstable. And I think for me, and obviously I always talk about my own experience, those pillars have been a little shaky, or those pillars haven't really been robust enough to support those relationships. And I've developed facilitated a gathering of women within a women's circle. And we were talking about this at the last circle that I held, where one of the participants had mentioned about having female relationships and female friendships where trust or lack of trust has ultimately paid the price for those relationships, and how trust, if it's not there, can then kind of damage self-esteem, self-worth, and also how you then view the world around you. And it got me thinking, and it's something that's kind of played on my mind for the last few weeks, really. Trust is such a fundamental necessity in life, whether that's trusting that your house will weather the storm, or trusting that you'll get paid on payday if you work, trusting that your primary caregivers will pay your bills so that roof stays over your head, or there's food in the cupboards. And if you haven't got that trust, what kind of life is that going to be? Because ultimately then you're on that kind of hyper vigilant, hyper alert, seeking out where you can get that sense of reaffirming that it is a safe space. It is a safe place to be in, the world that you're in. And without trust, it makes you feel uncertain. It kind of adds to those doubts. And I think when I think about kind of intimate relationships, whether that's family or interpersonal relationships, I feel as though trust for me has been a factor where I realize that I trust very few people. And it's that kind of self-protection, self-preservation that lends to that sense of being guarded in some respects as a way of protecting feelings, esteem, worth. And I think I have got a few trusted relationships. But even then, there's that sometimes that sense of, do I trust you explicitly, or do I trust you within the confines of certain boundaries? Now, I'm more inclined to say there's certain boundaries, but that's more so of trying to protect. And I think in relationships, there has to be that sense of vulnerability. Not that kind of sense is like, okay, there you go, do what you will with my heart. And I'll just weather the storm if it doesn't work out. Because to me, that would be a little naive. It would be a little sabotaging. Or is that my doubts? Or is that my doubts in that kind of sense of, do I actually trust you enough to give you my all, or will you betray that trust? And it's quite it's interesting, because I feel that I have so much self-awareness and questioning and unpicking, and a lot of the time in my head is this kind of almost like you can say two people sitting on your shoulders, and you're having this kind of, you're wrestling with this situation and you're weighing it all up and you're looking from all these different options, these different points of view, and it's like, well, am I thinking or feeling this because of that, or is it because of that? Why is that coming up for me? Which is good to be able to have that reflection. Of course, it's good to have that reflection and to know yourself well enough to know, well, actually, this points to this. And I think around the relationship with trust as well, because the conversations that we'd had during the circle was around relationships with other women, and how, and when I designed the Rising Rebel Women's Circle, that was kind of facilitated to bring women together, to facilitate an environment that is safe, that is nurturing, that is welcoming, that is non-judgmental, that is trustworthy. And if your trust within that circle gets broken or fractured, it will be an unsafe place to be, an unsafe place to share and be held and supported, because a pillar within that relationship dynamic is a bit unstable or a bit shaky. So it's about how you can build that sense of trust. And within the circle, that sense of trust is built around that sense of unity, of sharing within the circle, and all that is shared in the circle is held in the circle. And I think with having those boundaries and that kind of expectation, it builds that level of trust. Now, this could be a group of people who are strangers. It could be a group of people that have met from sitting within the circle. But to me, to be able to honor all that's shared in that circle, there has to be that sense of trust. And as I say, in my adult female relationships, there has been that lack of trust, that mistrust. And to get that trust back, you have to give a little bit more of yourself or demonstrate that you're a trustworthy person. And that can only be with how you turn up in life and turn up in relationships, and that sense of honor and respect that you have for yourself. We have to trust ourselves. We have to trust that we will turn up for ourselves. Trust that we will get comfortable with being a little uncomfortable with what we uncover. Trust that we are a good person. And that leads me to that sense of, with your journey in life. And through my conversations, I've made it very clear that my circle is small. And in making those decisions to let go and release certain relationships, I've had to trust myself in the decisions that I've made, and that the decisions that I've made are for the greater good, that are working towards the future that I'm creating, that I have that sense of surety within my decisions making, that I am walking a different path. And that path can be lonely. I say lonely, but I'm not alone. I say lonely because there's not many people that get it. There's not many people that I see that are on the same wavelength as me. There's not many people that can unsee what I've seen. And when it comes to that kind of sitting in a space that feels right, I cannot mistrust that judgment. Although I question it, and I had been questioning it over the last couple of weeks, thinking that perhaps if I revert back to my old ways, that I'd have a different outcome. But the outcome would still be the same if I reverted back. Nothing would have changed. The only thing that would have changed is me reverting. And that's not the change that I ultimately want. So in trusting myself in the decisions that I've made, I kind of had that reaffirmed to me recently when a family member reached out and we had a conversation which was welcomed. It was a meeting of minds. It was a mutual meeting of minds. It wasn't an opportunity to have conversations and put points of view across. It wasn't that kind of meeting. It was a meeting as two adult women having a conversation and honoring each other's journey to get to the point where they are today, and an observation that somebody else had made that made them question what they were being told. And by having that question or that seed of doubt placed in their mind, it then encouraged them to seek out the other side, the other person, rather than listening to the same narrative on repeat. And I have to appreciate that, because ultimately it takes somebody of a certain character to actually think, hold on a minute, and question it. Hold on a minute, let me just fact check that first. Hold on a minute, this isn't the full story. And it takes somebody like that to reaffirm, not that I need that reassurance, but I know it can't only be me that sees these things. And sometimes it feels like it is, and that makes me then question, am I right in thinking that? Because the more my kind of social media feed is curated to the things that I like or the things that I interact with, I see lots of posts that reaffirm my thought process. And that's how algorithms work, isn't it? The more you interact with certain content, the more it will generate more content like that. So it doesn't mean that your thought, what you're thinking is right. It just means you're seeing more, or you're seeking out more things that are similar. Okay. I'm intelligent enough to realize that that's the case. But the more kind of reading that you do and that kind of reflection, it opens up your mind a little bit to those thoughts, or that kind of the patterns that we've lived in, the environments that have nurtured us. And if we want different, you have to do different to get different results. Because if you keep doing the same, you're going to keep getting the same results. But you've got to have confidence and belief in what you were doing. But at times that can be shaken and makes you doubt. Or the doubts start creeping. You're thinking, is it right what I'm doing? Should I just do this? But ultimately, if you want different, you've got to do different. It's not going to change if you're still doing the same. And that's the dilemma that we have. And that's where trust comes into it, because you have to wholeheartedly believe and trust in yourself, even though there may be signs that shake you a little bit. But if you can trust yourself wholeheartedly in the decisions that you've made, you have to be a trustworthy person to yourself. You have to turn up for yourself, because it's all too easy to make excuses for not to do something, or we can talk ourselves out of everything. We can find reasons not to do certain things. But if we are going to make that change and become a trustworthy person, we have to build that trust with ourselves. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge. Trust that the decisions you've made are right for you. Now, that's if you've spent time and explored if they are. And as I say, for me, that decision was reaffirmed when somebody else had seen it, which had that kind of, it reaffirmed with me. But that's the interesting thing though, isn't it? is that we can be questioning. And then something happens to reaffirm. I think, okay, I get it. I am definitely on the right track. Need to do more of that and have confidence in that. And that's the biggest thing, is that how can we trust ourselves? How can our confidence grow? How can we have and develop that self-belief that is so strong and unshakable that we continue doing what we're doing and continue on this path? Like I say, the path can be quite lonely. But when you know the decisions that you're making come from a good place with the best intentions, and you're working towards the future and the legacy that you wish to leave behind, change is going to come. Change can feel a little unsettling and unnerving because it's away from what's familiar. And the further you step away from what's familiar, the further exposed you are to that sense of critique and criticism from yourself. And that's before anybody else says anything. Your own worst enemy is yourself, your own thoughts. And you're changing connections in your with your brain waves. You're changing connections and making new pathways, both internally and externally. But it's having that confidence to continue on that path. And that, my friend, is how you build trust. Trust for yourself, trust for others, trust for your journey, and trust for your future.